We always appreciate the time of Kansas U.S. Senator Roger Marshall joining us here on 95.7 FM KCMO, streaming as always on the KCMO Talk Radio app. Senator, good morning, and I just want to start off with some breaking news. The president announcing here in the last half hour on Truth Social that they have come to an agreement with the United Kingdom, and that could be part of, I guess, today's announcement that is coming at 9 o'clock Central Time. So what's your reaction to this news from the president and what's to come here?
Well, Pete, good morning to you and all your listeners. I would just encourage everyone to take a deep breath here as we get through these next 60 or 70 days. I think the biggest news here is here's a template. All the other nations can look at this trade plan and say, here's what the United States expects. If you treat us fairly, we'll treat you fairly. We are the largest consumer in the world. And we are in the catbird seat. You know, for instance, Mexico and Canada, 70% of their exports come to this country, 80% of them, versus only, 17% of our exports go to those particular countries. UK, not a huge market, but I think it's a sign of an ally saying, okay, let's treat America fairly. So I think it's a good first step. And I don't have to tell you, what we got China this weekend. The Secretary of Treasury emailed me yesterday, said he's excited to go over there. So there's a lot happening in the world of Donald Trump.
So is this really about, and this is what I speculated earlier, is this really about stacking up some wins, so to speak, with allies? And then everyone knows that China is obviously the bull in the China shop, so to speak. So is that what this deal with the UK and hopefully some others coming out are really about, just making it look like the world is coming together, really, frankly, against the Chinese?
Well, I think it's even more than that. I still would encourage us to not let China off the hook. As important as they are to the Kansas farmer, I want to replace those markets with year-round E15, jet fuel, those types of things. So I think we need to be careful. There's so much more than just the tariff rates when it comes to China. They still are intellectual property. 90% of the counterfeits that are coming to this country are made in China. The fentanyl issue you and I've discussed multiple times on your show, it goes on and on and on and on. So I think we need to really, really hold China accountable here. And we'll just see. Again, we're the largest consumer in the world. This American consumer is so important to the world economy. So I'm just not ready to say, let's let China off the hook yet. Let's give the president a little bit of airspace here and see if he can negotiate something that's going to be a long-term solution. I think about those Chiefs. We need a long-term solution at left tackle here. Not a short-term solution, and we need a long-term solution with China.
Yeah, hopefully Josh Simmons part of that answer after the draft a couple of weeks back. Now, what are you saying and what are you hearing from Kansas farmers? New York Post and a lot of others have had different stories, but I'm reading this headline from the New York Post. U.S. farmers in full-blown crisis as Chinese orders for pork soybeans plunge over the tariffs. So how are you calming that industry here in Kansas, the ag industry?
Well, number one, the ag economy is in great despair, not because of these tariffs, but because of Joe Biden's policy. So last year, we had a record drop in net farm income, a record drop because of high interest rates, high fuel prices, high fertilizer prices as well, and not so good commodity prices as well. So the reason that the ag economy is in despair is because of Joe Biden. The only reason it's surviving in Kansas is because of the cattle industry and the dairy industry. So President Trump negotiated huge deals with Mexico and Canada, with South Korea, Japan, and China phase one. And because of those, the cattle industry and the dairy industry is carrying agriculture in Kansas. And put it in perspective, wheat is probably $1.5 billion business in Kansas, but beef industry is probably $15 billion. So it's 10x. That's how important the cattle industry is in Kansas as well. We just gave the farmers $10 billion 2 weeks ago. In an amazing amount of time, President Trump got that $10 billion into farmers' bank accounts as they take out loans for this year's crops. $450 million of that went to Kansas farmers. So a third of the value of the wheat crop, President Trump just subsidized the farmers. Now, I'm not proud of that. We want trade and not aid, but President Trump absolutely prioritizes the American farmer. And yeah, you're going to be able to find some very disgruntled farmers out there, just like you would in any industry. And I'm doing everything I can to help them in this reconciliation bill. I'm locked in on this tax credit called 45Z, which will allow us to take corn and sorghum, soybeans, and turn it into jet fuel.
This is Senator Roger Marshall, of course, state of Kansas on KCMO. So take me through, obviously, the big, beautiful bill, as it's been dubbed, is getting negotiated right now. And you're pushing hard on this no tax on overtime. How does that part of this bill, how does that fit its way in? And what exactly are the details behind what that would look like?
Right. So certainly President Trump and myself have prioritized a tax cut for hardworking men and women, people that bring their lunch pail to work. I think of all of our union workers there in the Kansas City metro area, as well as people that, again, that work for a living, that do overtime. And what this would allow is up to a $10,000 deduction for your first $10,000 of overtime in a given year, $20,000 if it's a couple. And if you think about that, a couple had $20,000 of overtime, they would get to keep $4,000 more of their hard-earned money. So put it in perspective. If we don't get this tax cuts bill done and extend the Trump tax cuts, it's going to cost them $2,000 more taxes. So I'm trying to save that $2,000, give them another $4,000. You got a couple out there making $60,000, $80,000 a year, $100,000. That's a lot of money, Pete. So we want to make sure that we prioritize taking care of hardworking men and women across the country.
So you can get this, hopefully, into the big, beautiful bill, and then it can pass with just a 51-vote majority in the Senate. That's the goal here, right?
You got it. So most things in the Senate take 60 votes, but under this what's called reconciliation process, we can do it with just 50 votes in the Senate. So we have the majority in the House, not much of one. So they need to, I'm going to jump to the quick here, Pete. The big hang-up is how much we're willing to cut. All of us have lots of ideas where to give tax breaks to. President Trump wants to prioritize any new tax cuts to hardworking men and women. But the challenge right now is, can the House come up with some cuts? And I'll give you for instance, Medicaid spending has went up 50% in 5 years. Medicaid spending has went up 50% in 5 years. We went from 70 million to over 90 million people on Medicaid the last 5 years. Now, my belief is we need to strengthen Medicaid for those who need it the most. We need to strengthen Medicaid for those who need it the most. And right now we're going to go broke, and no one's going to have anything if we don't get our hands around that particular issue. So what's happening now is the House needs to decide how much money are they willing to save hardworking Americans on tax money and Medicaid, and then let's take some of that money and help me give a tax break on that overtime, if that makes sense.
So what is that, when it comes to Medicaid, is that really about making sure that able-bodied citizens are not milking the system, and how do you actually go about implementing that?
Yeah, so I think that's, step number one is there's 7 million healthy men, working-age men that are out there right now in the country that are not working, and I don't have a number how many of them are on Medicaid and food stamps right now, but we would like to put work requirements on them and have them very consistent on all the social programs, on food stamps as well as this particular issue as well. And what it probably looks like is 80 hours a month that we would like for you to either work, volunteer, or go to school. 80 hours a month. And that's just it. I want to give people a hand up, not just a handout. So I'm trying to work for special Pell Grant money where you could use it in an apprenticeship or use it on some type of a short-term technical college, that type of thing. But we need to move people from a handout to a hand up to get people back to work. I think the greatest safety net in the entire country is a job, Pete. I think when you have a job, it brings purpose, it brings meaning to your life, it helps your mental health. And I think deep inside of us, every one of us wants to take care of our family, and I think that we need to help people do that.
What's your timeline? What are you thinking, and what are you hearing about a timeline to get this thing done and get it passed?
Yeah, I think the first deadline is Memorial Day.
Okay.
So the House's goal is to get their stuff done on Memorial Day, and then we're going to take their bill and try to make it better. We're going to try to save more money after we get their bill. We're with a 3-seat majority. We're actually a little bit more conservative than the House is. That's unusual in America. The Republican Senate is more conservative than the House. You think about the SALT tax, and that we don't have a senator from a high tax state like Illinois or California, or New York, versus there's House members that have to live with that situation as well. So if they get it done by Memorial Day, if we got our work done by July 4th, it would be a miracle. But you have to have a goal. And part of the goal would be the backdrop of this is we're facing a financial cliff when it comes to what the debt limit is for the country. It might come June, July, August, I'm not sure, but we may be able to use that as a leverage to force Congress to get its job done. We do much better, it seems like, when we have a forced deadline upon us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, you're right. That's very true. It's like in college, you got to cram for that final exam, Senator. So we'll see how that plays out. And we do appreciate your time, as always, on a Thursday morning on KCMO. Thanks so much.
Yeah, Pete, I got a quick analogy for you. You should have asked me how you thought the draft was, and I would say, well, I don't know. I'll tell you in 5 or 10 years.
Yeah,
and
yeah, that's good.
And I just want your listeners to sit there and think about, okay, I'm going to make a decision today up here. I'm going to vote on something. The news is going to blast me. And sometimes it takes 5 or 10 or 20 years for some of these things to come to fruition. Think back to President Eisenhower and how it took decades to some of his projects to come to fruition as well. So you don't always know on draft night who was right or who was wrong, but I'm trying to take every decision, weigh all the pros and cons, the risk and benefits, and do the best I can for future generations.
Well, it's as the president has said before, China's playing a 100-year game, and we've been playing quarter to quarter for far too long. And he's absolutely right about that, and that's the point you're making, I think, here.
Yes, sir, Pete.
Good
Thanks so
stuff.
much for having me.
Thank you, Senator. Have a great week. Roger Marshall on KCMO 95.7 FM.